From a visual perspective, Fritz Lang's Metropolis is a gorgeous movie. Today, nearly 100 years after its release, it's still a testament to what bold, ambitious filmmaking can look like. But it also holds up a dark, ugly mirror to society and dares us to give ourselves a good, hard stare. The story is a warning set in a dystopian future world where human beings are little more than cogs in a machine, and the terrible truth is the future is now. But literally, the movie is set in 2026.
Please hang up and try again.
Le Voyage dans la Lune, or A Trip to the Moon, is often credited as the first sci-fi film, produced by Georges Méliès in 1902 and clocking in at around 14 minutes. But even in the case of that film, the visuals lean into a much more fantastical aesthetic. The moon itself is personified, and the people who live there are more akin to fae folk than what we would later recognize as traditional Hollywood moon men. Metropolis is often credited as being the first feature-length sci-fi movie, and it is in fact a long movie, nearly 2.5 hours long. It was also one of the first features to have a score. A common collaborator of Lang and Gottfried Huberts was the composer, though there have been a variety of scores created for the movie over the years, maybe most notably in the 80s when the likes of Freddie Mercury, Pat Benatar, Bonnie Tyler, and Adam Ant were enlisted for the soundtrack of Giorgio Moroder's 1984 restoration. Unfortunately, even with the fantastic restorations we've gotten, we are missing a section of the movie that is filled in with a brief description of what's happening. It is kind of an important part, but all in all, for a 100-year-old film, it looks pretty damn good. Fritz Lang's wife at the time, Thea von Harbo, published a book called Metropolis, but it was always meant to be a movie and the two of them wrote the film together. Lang was originally inspired by a trip he took to New York where he was shocked by the city's many skyscrapers that he thought looked like a backdrop meant to, in his words, dazzle, divert, and hypnotize. Touring MGM Studios gave him a vision for a film that, funny enough, was meant to rival the motion pictures being made in Hollywood. He'd already had the idea of making a film that, at the onset, appeared to be a utopia, only to later reveal the conditions as being quite the opposite. Other inspirations included RUR, or Rossum's Universal Robots, which was a play about a robot revolution, Alita, which was a Soviet sci-fi film, and the works of novelist H.G. Wells. Sadly for Lang, H.G. Wells was not a fan of Metropolis and is quoted as having called it the silliest film, but we'll touch on some of the criticisms later. The film also references the biblical tale of the Tower of Babel to illustrate the disparities between the upper class and the working class. This, more so than the AI robot, and we're getting to that, I promise, is the central conflict of the story. And yes, the history of the time period does unfortunately need to be looked at. There is the pesky political element of what was happening at the time, and a lot of research is done with crossed fingers, hoping nothing negative will come to light about the filmmakers. And I learned a lot. For instance, Fritz Lang, half Jewish himself, was not a Nazi. His wife at the time, Thea von Harbo, who again had a major hand in the story, did later join the Nazi Party. Does this disconnect make for some muddled messaging in the movie? Yes it does. Lang himself later in life said that in retrospect he was troubled by the simplistic resolution, the problematic politics of the thesis, and the fact that many members of the Nazi Party loved the movie.
Please hang up and try again.
I do think that it's important to briefly touch on the style of the film and how it informed the set design. It is very clearly a German expressionist piece, and Germany in the 1920s is not synonymous with any political party. Two of the most famous German expressionist films are F.W. Murrow's Nosferatu and Robert Wien's The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, both of which I very much want to cover at some point, and both with directors who noped out of Germany well before World War II. The style originated in live theater and was a direct response to the horrors of World War I. As a Studio Binder article puts it, it visualizes the country's collective anxiety through distorted, nightmarish imagery. Metropolis, for its part, takes this very literally, and the central character often imagines or dreams frightening things that are shown to the audience. The earmarks of a German expressionist film are high-angle shots, deep shadows and chiaroscuro lighting, extreme camera tilting, and impossible sets. It often rejects popular Western conventions of art. It isn't meant to be beautiful, it's meant to convey a troubled and confused society through exaggerated style and design. Metropolis exhibits all of these characteristics, but the sets stand out the most. The Art Deco design evoked the chaotic sense Lang was met with when visiting New York. The film wasn't unusual in its blend of matte paintings and scale 3D models, which gives the sets their depth, but the film is set apart by their scope and intricacy. Not only do we see buildings, but also roads, bridges, and overpasses with moving cars, trains, and aircraft. Lang was coming to the German Expressionist style somewhat late in 1927. This is widely considered one of the last German Expressionist films. By point of comparison, Nosferatu was released in 1922 and Caligari was released in 1920, but the Third Reich kind of ruined that too. It's also worth noting, since I keep bringing the film up as a point of comparison, that Fritz Lang was producer Erich Palmer's first choice to direct The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, but the filming schedule conflicted with Lang's availability. Though all in all, I think everyone landed where they were meant to. Metropolis isn't nearly as exaggerated as the earlier films, but still highly stylized with its sharp angular design, exaggerated tilted camera angles, and dramatic high-contrast lighting techniques. All the way down to the movement and formatting of the title cards.
Please hang up and try again.
Since I'm making this video, I feel like it is my responsibility to discuss some of the troubling aspects of the film before we can get to the uncannily on-point predictions that the movie made about the present year. As mentioned, Lang and von Harbo had differing political views, and the latters were trash. This meant that while no one could deny that the film was a visual marvel, there were quite a few eyebrows raised when it came to the story and the messages it was trying to convey. And to be perfectly honest, the story is kind of a mess. The main theme of the film is the mediator between the head and the hands must be the heart, as though they just need a liaison between the upper level and the lower level. No, never mind that the workers on the lower level are being completely exploited, and the men in charge seem to have at least some knowledge of this and are literally doing nothing to solve the problem. The film resolves this with a simple handshake. I'm going to attempt to use the German pronunciation of all of these characters' names. My apologies in advance. The boss man, Jo Fredersen, having a sudden change of heart is a nice thought, but if the real world is anything to go by, the people with the most money and power have little interest in sharing it. It also suggests that the heads are the visionary brains of the operation and the hands are only useful as mindless manual labor. I have an easier time believing the film's hero Frieder's evolution here. He's a bit of an idiot, or at the very least incredibly naive and sheltered, and is truly shocked when he sees the conditions of the workers. And he simply doesn't know what he's getting himself into, going so far as to swap places with another man, and by the time he discovers just how bad things are, he's too deep into it to just walk away. And yeah, he's in love with Maria. Personally, I found his interactions with Josefet and Georgie to be far more engaging. Also, the workers at this point have full-on revolted and destroyed the machines that were meant to run the city, so what exactly does society look like now? We never get that answered. And to backtrack, the revolution is spearheaded by Mecha Maria, the evil robot controlled by the mad scientist Rotwang. So she's a villain, right? And she's the one who's inciting this revolt by pointing out that the workers are being exploited? And that the machines are literally resulting in their deaths. Like, she's right. Are they suggesting she's lying to them in that moment? And then there's the Grot character. No, Grot. There you go. Early in the film, this guy rats on the workers, telling you that they are using an underground cave network every night, though he doesn't know what goes on there. We discover that the workers are convening to hear stories and messages of hope from the real Maria. This is the inciting incident for the robot becoming Mecha Maria. And I assumed that Grot was meant to be a secondary villain. At the end of the film, he's also the only worker in communication with Yo when the others are revolting, and he seems to still be on his side. But then at the end, he becomes the worker's spokesperson. So now I have no idea how I'm supposed to be viewing this character at any point.
Please hang up and try again.
Critical response at the time varied. Again, audiences were quick to praise the film's design, style, and effects, but didn't quite know what to make of the messaging and the oversimplified resolution. Again, even Lang had issues with it upon re-examination later in life. Unfortunately, Josef Goebbels was a huge fan and quite pleased with the perceived messages of the film.
I was ordered to Goebbels to go there. And the Führer had said, this is the man who will give us the Nazi film. I was very much perspiring at this moment.
Also, people just complained it was too long, which I agree with to a point. I think both the sequences of the children running out of the lower level homes and the workers swarming the upper level streets could have been tightened up considerably, and it would have given the ending sequences some much needed momentum. As time's gone on and we've moved further away from the period the film was made, it has been regarded much more positively and is mostly remembered and discussed in regard to its technical excellence. The likes of Roger Ebert, Martin Scorsese, and Leonard Maltin all consider it essential viewing, and it has inspired the music of Queen, David Bowie, Whitney Houston, Janelle Monáe, and Madonna, just to name a few.
Please hang up and try again.
And there's so much that this film accurately predicted that it's kind of bizarre. Reports are forecasting that we could see our first trillionaire as soon as 2027, so exactly 100 years after the release of Metropolis. Cool. For the vast majority of us, though, the larger concern is the rapidly shrinking middle class, or at least anyone below the upper middle class. If there's that much money at the top, then everyone else is basically becoming the working class by default. Gig culture has become more and more normalized as an increasing number of companies lay off more and more workers. Subscriptions are the driving model of most businesses now, so you don't truly own anything and instead are basically renting everything and paying for it every month. Want to own a home? Great, but only if you make 6 figures. One of the oddest things about the world of Metropolis is the lack of people living in the city. Sure, the rich are in the skyscrapers and the high-rises and the clubs, but what about all the rest of these apartments? The working class is powering them on, but they don't live in them. Presumably they can't afford to, and because the rich find it easier to not have to look at them, not to have to think about them, not to acknowledge their very existence, they have been relegated to these lower-level cities. The only person who appears to be middle class is Rotwing? It really doesn't go into much detail about characters like Yosefet, who definitely isn't in the working class, but in the beginning of the film works for Yo in the upper city, so he and people like him probably qualify as members of the middle class, but there aren't very many of them. And then there's the character known as the Thin Man, who operates as Yo's spy and whose primary role is to creep on Frieder. And I gotta say, in a movie with a deranged mad scientist and his evil robot, this guy is creepy. I'm not sure where exactly he would fall, though. He's not on the level of Yo, not that anyone is, but he definitely pulls rank on Yosefet. Plus, the way he dresses and even just carries himself suggests that he's in a somewhat enviable position, so maybe he's one of those upper middle class people. All the other characters, including Maria, the heroine, are workers. Actually, they never explicitly state this, but I believe Maria is some sort of one-woman childcare center. I'm also curious as to how she knows, for instance, the story of the Tower of Babel. Did she read it? Are there libraries that the workers have access to? Or for that matter, schools for the workers? I sort of don't think there are. Again, the workers are treated as though the only thing they are capable of is labor. They're also largely presented as one big collective. They all seem to basically think the same, act the same, and move the same, with only a couple of exceptions.
Please hang up and try again.
First of all, there's Grot, whom I already covered, and then there's Georgi, whom I've mentioned, but I thought slotted into this section best. He's not a huge role, but I think he's an important one. When Frieder visits the machine halls, he meets this character and proposes they swap places. Frieder has already let Yosefet stay in his home after Yo fires him, so Frieder figures he can take on one more person, no problem. Frieder tries to connect with Georgi as a person, like a decent human, and Frieder always calls Georgi by his name. But when Georgi reaches the upper levels of the city, not only is he in for a wild culture shock, but he also realizes that he has to hide his identity. He's not allowed to be there, and the Thin Man in particular begins to hunt him down. When the Thin Man talks to and about Georgi, he calls him 11811, his worker number. It's the upper and upper middle class's way of dehumanizing him and stripping him of his individuality and personal identity. They see the workers as that collective that the audience have been trained to see. No need to learn his name, he just needs an identifier. Even the hats the workers have include their names in small letters, while their numbers are large and easy to see. Today, we're often in situations where we're essentially reduced to a number or other identifier. And not to put too fine a point on it, but Von Harbo's own future party was quite fond of dehumanizing people by assigning them numbers so they didn't have to use their names. The loss of individuality can be seen in other ways in modern day society as well. Social media has never been as centralized as it currently is. While it can connect people and form communities, it also has a dark side. Through influencers, trends, and the power of the algorithm, conformity is on the rise, encouraging consumers to look the same, behave the same, and be a part of the in-crowd. At times, it feels like we're becoming a hive mind, afraid to step out of line and lose whatever group we're part of.
Please hang up and try again.
Alright, I put it off long enough. Let's talk about AI. AI, or artificial intelligence, is used and has been used in a variety of ways for a while now, but there are different types of artificial intelligence, and we tend not to differentiate between them in conversation, which probably isn't doing us any favors. So I'd like to cover the distinction really quickly. First of all, there's traditional AI, and it's likely you use some version of this fairly regularly. The purpose of traditional AI is to analyze data, find patterns, and make predictions. This includes anything from GPS navigators to email spam filters. If you're watching this video because it was suggested to you, that was traditional AI. But then there's generative AI, or Gen AI. Gen AI uses the information from data sets to generate content via text, images, video, audio, or code. Some popular examples are ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and Midjourney. Gen AI is a lot more contentious and comes with a whole host of concerns. AI has next to no federal regulation in the United States at the moment, resulting in some very problematic issues. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I do want to touch on a few of the big ones. There is the environmental concern. Communities where data centers move in see not just a massive hike in their electric bills, but a contamination of their water. Then there's the issue of where the data in the datasets is coming from. It's not the same for all companies. Some are trying to build their own datasets in-house, but others can pull content from just about anywhere online, copyright material included. The generated output can then be taken and spread as original material without the actual artists from whom the system is pulling data being compensated or given consent. More recently, this has opened some of these AI companies to lawsuits from the likes of George R.R. Martin and Studio Ghibli. And most unsettling, these systems can generate inappropriate images and videos of non-consenting individuals, including in certain cases, minors. And this is becoming concerningly widespread. On LinkedIn recently, someone had generated a video of two celebrities kissing, which I believe does constitute sexual abuse, and they had just openly posted this on their social media. Which means that now, at long last, we can talk about the goddamn robot. Mecha Maria. The movie just calls it Maria, but I need to differentiate between it and the human Maria. So Mecha Maria is an artificial intelligence that is capable of moving around on its own. In the film, it is created by the mad scientist Rotwang, who originally makes her to be a sort of copy of a woman named Hel, whom he was in love with, but she was also Yo's wife and died giving birth to Frieder. Yeah, it gets messy. But the point is, when Yo finds out about the robot, he orders Rotwang to instead turn her into a copy of Maria because he worries how Maria's influence will affect the working class. But, as you can imagine, Rotwang isn't exactly Yo's #1 fan. So he agrees, but plans to use the robot to destroy the city and kill Frieder in the process. So Yo thinks the robot is working under his influence when Rotwang is actually controlling it. In one of the most visually stunning scenes of the movie, the robot takes on the guise of Maria before going on a weirdly sexually charged rampage, leaving conflict in its wake and convincing the workers to destroy the machines, while the city below, the location of all of the children, becomes flooded. The real Maria escapes from Rotwang, who is keeping her hidden during the robot's frenzy, and she, along with Frieder and Josephet, save the kids. But before the workers realize this, they blame Mecha Maria and burn it at the stake, revealing it's not the real Maria. Oh, and Frieder kills Rotwang. I also wanted to give a quick shout out to Bridget Helm here. Not only did she have to play both the human Maria, who was the embodiment of all the kindness in the world, but she also had to play the dark and twisted Maria that we see near the end of the film. And on top of all of that, she was also the person who was inside of the robot costume, so she did all of it. We've had robots in our home already. If you've ever owned a Roomba or a drone, you've owned a robot. That ad for the self-driving Waymo car that definitely looks like the opening sequence to a horror movie. Simply another example. But these more android-looking machines that do your chores that you've seen in sci-fi like Rosie from the Jetsons or Marvin from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy are now a reality. And fun fact, C-3PO's design was even inspired by Mecha Maria. You can look to inventions like the Neo Home robot if you want to live out that dream. I personally do not. These things creep the crap out of me and sound like a security and privacy nightmare. And the thought that someone could potentially pull a Rotwang, yeah, I'll pass. But the point stands that Mecha Maria isn't as far off as we'd probably like to think. Just because a humanoid robot isn't responsible for shutting down all of civilization's power yet, doesn't mean they aren't planning on pulling a 2008 Fort now. You're still young. But what was all that business about generative AI that I was blabbering on about earlier? The robot itself isn't generative AI, right? Unless you count the storytelling utilizing the artistic medium of dance and verbal propaganda. And what dataset would it even have been using? This is actually a legitimate question I'd like to pose, and I'm fairly sure Lang and Van Harbo didn't even consider it at the time. We know that there are libraries in the Club of Suns, so maybe Rotwing has a way of hacking that material, or perhaps its entire dataset is simply based on its creator's thoughts. But let's say you don't think any of that should count for one reason or another. What other argument could there possibly be that Mecha Maria is generative AI? It's a fucking deepfake, people. When Yo first sees the robot, Rotwing tells him no one will be able to tell the machine man from a mortal. We're already running into this. There are still tells, but AI-generated video and audio is consistently being refined, and gaining access to AI tools is becoming easier and easier for the masses. You may have experienced something like this already. I'll admit I have. Say you're watching a video passively and you don't notice anything out of the ordinary, and you go to the comments and everyone is complaining that it's AI, so you go back and look at the video again, and sure enough, there's something off. There's a blur where there shouldn't be, or the faces in the background look like they're melting, or there are misshapen hands. And it's happening the other way too, where we believe that images or videos are AI when they're not. In all honesty, we're probably closer to a Max Headroom situation than a Mecha Maria one, but like a version where Max was created on purpose by a corporation and made to spread misinformation for political and financial gain. And then there are companies peddling AI clones, copies of creators that said creators don't need to make their own content anymore. Some influencers are even entirely made up. There's a terrible trend right now of content being pumped out for content's sake. Unless you're making the choice to be very intentional with the content you are consuming, it's very easy to fall into a trap. Many words, zero substance. Nothing is truly being said. There's a quote that I believe originally came from, and I apologize in advance, I'm going to butcher this name, Joanna Makajewska, that has been making the rounds, and you've probably heard some variation of it so many times that it makes your eyes roll at this point, but it goes like this. You know what the biggest problem with pushing all things AI is? Wrong direction. I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do my art and writing. Not for AI to do my art and writing so that I can do my laundry and dishes. But AI content is everywhere without the human experience behind it. In Metropolis, Rotwing takes Maria's literal body and creates a perfect physical copy of her, one that fools even the people who see her regularly. Even Frieder at first doesn't realize that the robot isn't the real Maria. It's able to inspire violence from people who never met the real Maria, as well as those that thought that they knew her well. This far-fetched idea that only used to exist in science fiction is becoming an all-too-real possibility. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go have an existential crisis.
Please hang up and try again.
I might as well quickly mention that Sam Esmail had planned to remake Metropolis as a miniseries and had even begun the casting process. According to IGN, Universal Cable was prepared to spend up to $10 million per episode. Anyway, that got shelved in 2023 due to the ongoing writer's strike and the fact that the film was entering the public domain. And, like, that's fine. I don't know that we need to remake this. Visually, it would be difficult to top what Lang has done here, and as far as the story and the themes go, you'd really need to pull the guts out of it to make it work. Maybe do something inspired by Metropolis. I get that it's harder to greenlight something like that, especially with an $80 million price tag, but I promise audiences are craving original content. But things are becoming intense. I don't have any answers. I can just analyze the content and, well, AI already does that, right? Who needs people anyway?
Please hang up and try again.
One last thing that I wanted to note really quickly is I have a pretty extensive further reading section in the description box. Some of it is just about the production of the film, which is really interesting, but anything that is about any of the other topics that I covered, especially anything that had a headline that I used, does have the entire article linked, and I really would encourage people to read not just headlines, but to actually read the articles so you can get that information in its full context, and you can, do further research on your own as well. It's really important with generative AI in particular to know where they are pulling content from and what it is being used to do. As I said, not all datasets are created equal, and any video clips that I used are going to be credited at the end right here.